Welcome to another episode of the Pennock Knockdown, a podcast where we explore key tactics and marketing strategies for digital marketing leaders in the DTC space. Today, I've got a special guest with me, Philippa Gamse. She has clocked over 25 years in digital marketing, strategy, and analytics. She's consulted with nearly 500 clients and has worked with websites that have cumulatively generated hundreds of millions of dollars. She's helped brands in North America, Europe, and the Middle East translate the numbers into transformational ideas that move businesses forward. Philippa is the author of 42 Rules for a Website That Wins. It's been endorsed by Guy Kawasaki himself, and she has taught at 3 international business schools. She's also a past 20-plus year member of the National Speakers Association and is now a frequent podcast guest. She has a new book that will be published here any day in June 2025. So, Philippa, a lot going on here. So excited to have you on the show and pick your brain for your expertise.
Great. Hi, Nikki. Thank you. And it's, by the way, I love your show name, Pennock Knockdown.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we're knocking down tricks and tactics for marketing. So here we are. So, Philippa, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing prior to kind of starting consulting and working on all these different strategies and analytics plays for so many brands.
As you said, it's been a while since I've been doing that, so I'm not sure I can remember that far back. But I mean, I was always interested in technology and communications, but using technology for what it can do for us, and not just because it's technology. And that's kind of my approach to analytics. A lot of people find analytics is really, they take one look at a page of analytics and glaze over, which is entirely understandable. And so, my approach is very much that I want to help business owners understand why analytics is so important to your business growth, and how you should think about it, and how you can, talk to somebody like me who doesn't mind looking at all those charts and graphs to get what you need to grow your business.
I bet you're a wizard in there, just showing them stuff on the fly that they have no idea about their business. That's why I love working with technically minded marketing folks like yourself. So on this show, Philippa, we like to get into kind of different parts of marketing strategies, channels, campaigns, what have you, that are really working well for brands you're interfacing with these days. So, we're midway through 2025. Would love to kind of understand what that landscape of good marketing programs looks like today. Shed some light on what you're finding to be pretty successful.
Well, you know that if you look at any interviews with, or any surveys, I should say, of marketing directors, the number one marketing tactic that comes back is email, as in, newsletters and stuff, which is amazing because, I mean, for years, people have been saying, email is dead, email is boring, nobody uses it anymore, but it's just not true. And I think it's because it's such a simple technology, and, people give you permission to get in touch with them. So your email list is such a gold mine. And what's also very interesting is that when you look at the analytics, one of the things you can do is look at different marketing tactics. So you can see exactly which tactics and which campaigns drove your best types of visitor. And organic search, so, and Google still rules organic search, but also YouTube searches and Bing a little bit and so on, is still also a very high quality traffic driver because, again, people are proactively looking for something to solve their problems or their needs or their questions, and they found you because they're out there looking for it. Social media, especially sort of social media advertising, I always tell clients to be really careful and to look very carefully at the analytics, because a lot of times those visitors are low quality in that they take one look and walk away because they weren't really looking to, they sort of saw your post on the way through a load of other things that they were actually interested in doing. And maybe they thought it looked interesting and they clicked on it for a minute, but that's not really what their mindset is at the moment. And so they haven't got that same intent. So even though everybody thinks social media is very cool and it's certainly it's cheaper than like pay-per-click advertising, I think you have to be very careful how much effort you put into it and make sure you're getting some sort of return.
I like that you started with proper owned media channels, right? Email list, you grow, you own, how you show up organically on, SEO, AEO, and GEO now, you own, you control. What about those, like, we work a lot with emerging brands that still don't have this pool of people on their email list that they want quite yet. It's still a little small. What do you do about those brands that are like, those things are not this size where the conversion rate equates to the volume of sales we need? Like, how do you help them through navigating maybe that stage of growth they're not on yet?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a sort of magic bullet, and every so often we talk about social media posts that went viral, and everybody says, "How can I make my social media post viral?" And the answer is we don't know, because there's no like formula that says if you do this, you'll get 1 million followers, right? Sometimes it's just pure luck and completely unexpected. But I think the other side of that is just consistent, really good content, and just being out there is just so important, and it takes effort. But doing what we're doing here, I mean, why am I here today? Because you want content, and I want to be featured in content. So this is a win-win for us. But this is how we get to get people to notice us, and being quite targeted about that. So, understanding who your target market is and making sure that you're showing up where they are.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, if you're doing a load of TikTok stuff, but your target market, I don't know, is mostly on Instagram, you're wasting your time, right? So you really need to understand the people that you want to attract, so that you show up where they are, and you talk about stuff that they are interested in. So unfortunately, it's not an overnight thing usually, but over time you can certainly gain some traction.
Okay, so let's go back to the example. I'm just going to go back to like email because I'm with you that I think we don't do email as an agency, but I love that discipline. So let's say that, you've looked at the analytics and you're like, gosh, this brand's email conversion rate is off the charts. Like, now I want to work with the team to do like more of their email planning, Marcom, whatever. Like, how do you actually convince teams to like staff spend their time on the parts of marketing that you see the data suggest it will add the biggest return for them?
I think that honestly, you've got the data there. That's what you need, right? I mean, I can give you an example. Unfortunately, it's not in your field, but just to illustrate, one of the things you can do in analytics, if you want to get a little more into the technology, is that you can assign a value to different types of marketing sources when visitors come in. And I once had a manufacturing client, and so this is B2B. So I'm sorry, it's outside of your area, but I think it shows you the idea here. Right. What they did was, and that value doesn't mean that you're actually selling something. It doesn't have to mean that. It can just be a notional number, because what you're using it for is comparison. So as an example, they had things you could do on the site. So the little steps were, what we call micro conversions, of the things that they could do along the way to what you actually want them to do, which is place an order. So for example, they could download part specifications, and they could get shipping charges for specific types of orders. And then obviously they could place an order later on. So for example, this client, what they did was to say, if people download part specs, we'll give that a value of, let's say, $2 per download. Right. If they download the actual shipping charges, that means that they are more further down the line, right? Because they're thinking about what's it actually going to cost us to get this stuff. And so they gave that a notional value of, I don't know, $5. And then if they actually submitted an RFP, give us a request for a quote, that was, say, $10, because that's not your actual sale, but it is a request for a quote. And then what you can do is to see if all of that adds up. So every time somebody does one of those steps, that notional value is applied. What you can then see is how much each channel generates in marketing value. And at that point, I still think I have this slide from a while ago. The email marketing value was way higher than anything else on that chart, which included, social media, or different types of social media and what have you, right? So right there, you show that to your sales team and you say, hey, do you want leads? Well, look at this, right? This is how you get them. And I think that is the value of data, because you can't argue with that.
Right. It's very true. Out of curiosity, in that play you just walked us through, was the brand or the business collecting data for Like, did you have to leave an email address to download the specs and the shipping?
Very honest, I can't remember. Probably.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think that's interesting to think through. And then I guess now that you've identified for them the brand so clearly that email was where the best results were, now you have to look at their email list and assess, is this going to continue and sustain, or now do I have to find a solution with the brand to grow their email list in a qualified manner?
Right.
Um,
And if we take that a step further, so when we get these analytics and this data, okay, we can see certain things, and then what do we want to do? We want to try something as a result, right? So we want to do more of something, or we want to change something, or whatever. And because it's there's no point getting all this data unless you're going to do something with it.
right.
And so, to what you just said, did they get an email address? And I said I can't remember, but it might be interesting to test. Asking for an email address and not asking for an email address.
Right.
Because if somebody's just downloading the part specs or even the shipping charges, it might be that they're kind of thinking about it, but they know that if they give an email address, they're going to get bombarded with sales calls or some other sort of follow up, and they're not ready for that. And so if they can't get the shipping charges without giving the email address, they're not going to. And so, that would be an interesting test. And again, with different target markets and different types of prospects, their tolerance for doing that might be different. And you can say, give us your email address and get 10% off your first order or something along those lines to do that incentive piece.
Yeah.
But all of these things are things that you can start testing because you're going to have the data to know what works best in your situation.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And I don't know the landscape, but the competitive landscape of the business you were just referring to, but I could imagine like if they are the best of the best or there's only 10 players in the space, capturing email is probably not going to be that big of a deterrent. But if they can just go down the next domain and there's hundreds to pick from, they might not do it. So there's so many factors in play. And I love that you're showing us the complexity, but then like simplifying it at the same time to some extent. Got it. So okay, we talked about email a little bit. I assume depending on the business, SMS can be similarly valuable. You mentioned organic search as well as social. Any channels that you're just like, and maybe alluded to the fact that social ads can be challenging to get good customers from. Any other parts of marketing that are something you're taking a little bit more time to like educate your audience and your brands with now as just like a symptom of being in year 2025? Any changes that you're observing?
Well, I mean, we're talking about digital marketing, but I do think it's always important to remember that there is a world out there.
Mhm.
So networking either online or in person is still really valuable. There are people who are doing direct mail just because it's so unusual to get direct mail now that it's gone back to working better. Right.
Mhm.
So I mean, I think we're still in a relationship world. And so how do you create relationship? I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn because I actually find it really helpful to connect and meet with people that might be interesting to talk to, people to create partnerships with or explore synergies. And it doesn't mean that, I hate getting connection requests where it's basically, will you connect with me? And you say, yes, okay. And the next thing you know, they're bombarding you with, right, will you buy this and will you buy that, which I have no interest in, right? So don't abuse it. But I still think that creating relationship and creating value with people is still a really good marketing tactic, however you do it.
Mhm. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the cold emails, cold LinkedIn requests, like everything, everywhere there that you can have an advantage and the costs are low, it's just getting gobbled up so quickly, and it's really annoying to see that happen so often.
And we said we weren't necessarily going to talk about AI, but I should also say that when you get these AI, have you tried the stuff that AI writes for you on LinkedIn? When you have
I
ingestion requests.
Yeah, I usually don't let AI do the first pass. I usually have AI like help with my editing. But yeah, like without proper prompting, it's really hard to get
But
any
when it drafts a connection request, it's some of that stuff is just, and it's so generic. I mean, it's so clearly AI. And I should say, having talked about SEO, that actually I was just reading something this morning. One of the things that AI is doing that's becoming very challenging for marketers is taking the place of search engines.
It really is.
That
Yeah, we're seeing, I think in February is when we first started seeing sales attributed to chatbots. So like the Gemini or Chat GPT. So it's pretty incredible how quickly that's taking over the user search behavior. I think the benefit of the transition is the best tactics from SEO still generally apply. Like you have to be more conversational in your writing style. You have to answer more questions that weren't asked in your writing style. But a lot of the best practices are still at play from SEO to the AEO GEO lane.
And I'm now seeing AI sources as traffic sources in analytics, which is also interesting.
Yeah. Someone was telling me just yesterday, Google Analytics does not look at things outside of Google Analytics search quite as well as other platforms. So, like if you're looking for traffic coming from your Google search images or your Google search
Mm.
AI responses at the top, it's not it's actually not tracking that traffic for you. So it's Google itself in GA4 is apparently understating traffic from Google Organic, which I'm sure they'll solve any day because they can't do that to themselves. But that's like talks about the speed at which all of this is moving.
Right, right.
It's
Yeah.
wild. It's
Mhm.
wild. So walk us through a little bit about like how businesses find you and kind of what your initial maybe like month or couple of months, like what you're actually doing with the brands that you're helping as they come on as net new brands.
So, what I would say is if you have a website, and I hope this doesn't apply to any of your listeners, but if you don't have analytics at all, or if you aren't looking at what the analytics are telling you, then you're essentially shooting in the dark with everything that you're putting into your website. Because even if you're getting sales, you don't know what you're missing out on. You don't know how many more sales you could be getting. You don't know where you're losing visitors that you could fix, and things could change. So I read a statistic, I think last week, that essentially almost 40% of businesses are still not properly using analytics, which is a lot, right? And there's a huge potential out there. So you mentioned I do have a new book coming out next month, which I'm very excited about. It's called Website Wealth. And it's called Website Wealth because if you do this properly, you can generate a lot more business. And it's got a lot of stories in it about how that can be and how you need to think in order to do that without having to get into all the graphs and charts and technology and jargon and all of that. So it's a book for business owners. And so, what I do is firstly, make sure that the data is clean, obviously. I mean, you have to do the kind of geeky stuff first, and that it's being properly collected. And I do usually work with Google Analytics. And one of the things that you can do is to really customize the data that you're getting to fit the individual business that you're looking at. Because essentially now anything that happens on a website can be tracked. So, any click, any places where people hover over with their mouse, how much of a video or a podcast people watch or listen to, whether they start filling in forms and they don't complete the form, whether they put something in a shopping cart and they don't complete that transaction. I mean, there's all sorts of things we can dig into. And the default version of Google Analytics out the box doesn't necessarily do the most helpful job. There are some things that I immediately change in their settings. Um, so customizing for a specific business scenario where we look at the website and we say exactly what is this website trying to do? Where are all the things where it's important for the visitor to click on something or engage in some way? Because we want to know if those things are happening. So making sure the data is properly collected. And then, of course, from that, we start saying, okay, so what's happening? And there are essentially two aspects. One is where we know what should be happening, and we say, is it happening? And if not, why not? And the other is the unexpected stuff that says, hey, look at this. Stuff that we would never have thought of. And there are stories in my book about new products and services that we've created based on things that we found in the analytics that we could never have otherwise known. new revenue sources, and also places where we were just leaking traffic, visitors, interactions that, again, we would have had no idea about. Yeah, so hopefully, I am very excited about it. I'm hoping it will inspire people to really want to look at analytics.
And what would you say, like, is there a size of business from a traffic perspective or any other qualification that you're like, it shouldn't matter yet? Like, is there a business that's too small that should be not worried about analytics yet?
Well, but if you put up a website and you want it to do something for you, then you need to know what's going on. And I mean, yes, I do sometimes start with businesses that have very low traffic, and then obviously goal number one is let's increase the traffic.
Mhm.
Now I don't do all that. Like I don't do SEO, right? I don't do social media campaigns, but we can clearly say this is what you need to be doing. And then along the way, make sure that the people that we're getting from those campaigns are the right kind of people. And then you can start optimizing the rest of the site as you start to get that traffic. I mean, occasionally, there are sites, for example, if you're a business that only works with government contracts or something like that, then, your website is probably not mission critical because that's not how you sell. But for every other website, even if you're not selling direct products online, people come to your website. If they hear about your business, they come to your website to check you out. One of the things that I know from looking from analytics for so long is that if somebody comes to your website and they don't know who you are, that About Us page is absolutely critical because they will go there. They were like, "Who are these people?" Um, and their key question when they're looking at the About Us page is, "Do we believe this? Can we trust this business
Yeah.
to do what they say they do?" Which means they want to know who you are. They want people. I mean, you know, uh, very impersonal pages that don't name anybody, right? Um,
I feel like they're so common. I could just tell you I've been on a couple About Us pages even earlier today, and I'm like, "This seems like a very small intentional operation, like, why do I not get more color here?" So is that a common area that you dissect right away and you're like,
yeah.
"Client, what are you doing?"
I mean, I used to have a thing that I used to love talking about when I was speaking, and probably I'll start talking about it again, but about how to build emotional connections on your website. Because people are still people. People still buy. I remember years ago, I actually started my career at
Mhm.
Deloitte Consulting in London, and they trained us, in selling skills, and people buy people. And that
Mhm.
hasn't changed, right? We have to do it now online, we have to do it digitally, but we still have to do it.
Right.
So it's really but I'm not gonna buy from you if I haven't a clue who you are. I haven't really don't I'm not convinced that you can do what you say you do, that I can trust you not to just take my money and disappear.
Right.
I just read a horror story again today, this morning. I'm on a women's speakers group, and they were talking about writing books, and this company that promoted themselves as ghostwriters, publishers, that whole thing, took loads of money and never did anything. And their website apparently was very, very convincing, but there was actually nobody there. It was a criminal organization from another country, right?
That
And
is
I
wild.
mean, so that's the problem. Online, you can do this stuff and you can convince people that you are something that
Yeah.
you're not. Um, but that website has to, that's why even if you're a small business, I mean, I'm a one person business, right? But your About Us page, like, who am I? Who are you going to be meeting when you work with me? Is really important.
Very valid stuff. I love it. Well, you gave us some really good nuggets here today. I think, like, not underestimating the power of your owned channels and the power of going to live events, like you mentioned, get out there and sell and connect firsthand. And then About Us, like, those are good nuggets in their own. And then obviously, yeah, if you're not taking your analytics seriously because you don't have the skill set, coming to someone like you would be a really, really good thing for any business that's online to do. Philippa, if you were starting all over again, what advice would you give yourself?
Whoa, don't do SEO. I am. I used to. I mean, when I was starting out, I did.
Yeah.
I did do it, and it drove me nuts. Um,
Yeah.
and I have to say, I mean, this was really bad. It's the only time I ever done this. I did not deliver for a client, and the client got understandably really annoyed, and
Yeah.
I kept making excuses. And in the end, it's like, look. Why don't you get your own message? You shouldn't be doing this. You don't like it.
Mhm.
Right. Just stop.
Right.
Right.
Oh, well, that's good advice. Don't do what you don't love, and if that thing happens to be SEO, stop immediately.
And there are plenty of people out there who are really good at it and really do love it. So, let them do it.
True. That's true. Well, we're about to wrap. Philippa, do you have a place that you wanna send people to who are interested to find more? You can mention it here, and we'll have it in our show notes.
Yeah. So my website is websitesthatwin.com.
Love it.
My book, Website Wealth, will be out next month, so I'm sure that will be on my site and on my LinkedIn. And at my website, I do have a free ebook now. It's called 5 Hidden Gems, and it's got 5 stories, as I mentioned earlier, of insights from analytics that we couldn't otherwise have known. 5 different actual real client stories where we made a significant difference to the business, created something new, fixed something major. Um, and it's all in English. There are no graphs or pie charts in any of the whole thing. But it's really designed to inspire people. This is what we found and this is what we did. So, if you read it and you go, that could be happening on my site, then that's the goal, is to get you thinking about what might I look at on my own site.
Love it. All right. Well, I'm excited to go download it and check it out. And again, appreciate all the nuggets you shared with us here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank